Welcome to the Diagon Podcast, an actual play tabletop role-playing game podcast. I'm your game master, Josiah. With me is my player,
William.
And today we're just doing a retrospective on the last 4 episodes and our adventure with Victor Smith. So I guess first, how do you think this holds up compared to other games you've played in?
Are we talking story-wise?
You can break it into different things if you want. If you want to say story-wise, it was good. Mechanically, it was weak. Whatever.
Okay. So, story-wise, I think it was good. There were some dips where I, as the player, was uncertain how to proceed. But overall, I think it rounded itself up very well. Mostly because you were able to adapt kind of how the story ended to what my character was able to figure out. Especially with the introduction of the Vatican's
Exorcist.
Yeah, from that perspective, I thought it was great. System-wise, I thought I enjoy this system so far. It's really simple, fast-paced. I mean, it's always the same 2 dice except for like the random encounters of certain things happening. But other than that, I thought that was really good, especially considering since it's just the 2 of us.
Yeah, and the random encounter stuff, that's just something I've lifted from all the OSR stuff I've read, where they're like, yeah, just give it a X in 6 chance. It's easy, fast, it works every time. It gets a decision made and on the table. But yeah, I think for me, system-wise, I like it because it gives you some flexibility where it's like, okay, because of how you're doing this, you can do this attribute and this skill, or, it doesn't have to be like, oh, every time you fire a gun, that's fitness plus firearms. It can be awareness or,
Right.
all number of things. And there are a few other systems that do that, but it's not a very common thing, in part because it means you have to add those numbers at the table every time.
Right.
So I'd say that's the only drawback, but the highest these numbers can go is 8. That's the biggest bonus you can get, rules-wise. Well, I guess technically if you had the right gimmicks, you could go higher, but that's not very common. It does really well at what I would call, like, unpowered detective pulp. So, like, Maltese Falcon, the Big Sleep. That all those sort of noir adventures, all your Lethal Weapon, all that kind of stuff. I think it can do all of that stuff really well. I really avoided combat though because I do not like the initiative system in it.
There wasn't a lot of combat, but narratively a role being made and that moving the story forward.
Yeah.
It worked out really well.
Yeah, I think system-wise, genre diversion is just a nice neutral system. It doesn't push a lot of things on the characters. There's not a lot of assumptions it makes. We did play with the optional 1 threshold rule, which I think it was a good choice.
Maybe with a different character, we might want to change that, but considering who I was playing, I think it made perfect sense.
Yeah, if we were running a game and you're playing like a Dresden type or a Percy Jackson type, then you should have higher threshold for sure. But when you're playing anyone who's fairly normal, I think 1 threshold makes a lot of sense because otherwise, I think it's way too easy for a character with, say, like 3 fitness to shrug off a gunshot.
Right. Because then it also makes it much more realistic. It doesn't matter how much you lift. It's not like your muscles are going to stop a bullet.
Yeah, you're just not getting that pump going, not on your grind.
Right? Not enough steroids.
All right, so what would you say, or actually, I guess I should compare it to the other games I've run. I'd say I do feel like having run this, I understand how to write an adventure a lot better. Like something finally clicked there, and I finally feel like I can sit down and have something and I'll know it's enough to run an adventure with, for sure.
Right.
For me, I think that was a big jump forward. I think it's probably the best mystery I've run that I've written.
And from the player's side, I would say there was never a point where I felt like, I guess the best way to put it would be like if I had thrown you a curveball, it never felt like interrupted you in any way. You're able to adapt it somehow into the story.
Yeah, I felt like I had a lot better grasp on what the situation was instead of trying to come up with plot concepts. I just built a situation, detailed out all the characters that I thought could matter, and just went from there. And I didn't, I just came up with motivation. I think that's a lot easier for sure.
Yeah, because then it's not like you're making a character, you're just making the why. and then going off of that, improvising.
Exactly, yeah. So I definitely am very, very happy with it. But I'd like to hear what your favorite moment and favorite character.
I think favorite moment for me would have to be when Victor finally got the photo. And at that point, he went from being somebody that believed none of it and was totally down to take photos and exploit people. That was him. But he got that photo, and at that point completely changed his trajectory and wanted to get evidence and get it out there no matter what. So I think that would be my favorite point. And what was the second question?
Favorite character.
Favorite character. We didn't get to see much of him, but Ward Rawlings.
The mine overseer?
That was yeah. We didn't get to see a lot of him, but his completely backhanding Capwell was fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, my favorite moment, it's Ward Rawlings walking up and just fucking yelling.
Yeah.
Just totally sick of all this crap. I would say I think my favorite character is probably the sheriff. I don't know if you ever got his name, Edgar Halsey.
Yeah, no, I never did. I don't have, because I have it. I'm using the gear section of it where I just have names because I can't keep up with it. I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to that guy over there, Josiah, and that one over there, Josiah.
Yeah, he's a little bit mauled off after the police in Rambo First Blood, where he's very much like, this is a quiet town, this is a nice town, I'm just here to, first I'm going to try and politely tell people to not be here and cause trouble, and then if things escalate, then I'll do something more. But he doesn't have the backbone to really get into it most of the time. We didn't get to see him fight the monster, tragically, but not unexpectedly.
Yeah, what would have a shotgun or a rifle been able to do that thing? I feel like nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
But he definitely would have been able to help in terms of when you were talking about like a fire hydrant and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I think with the way though how Victor and Helen, how they were driving, it's like,
yeah,
unless somehow, Victor gets in the back and grabs him with his fitness of 2 and somehow
yeah, it would have been a hard thing to do. I think pretty much the only thing you could have done maybe is if you had just told him to just flat out run.
You think he would have been able to run fast enough? Or I would have had to divert?
You'd need to make an influence check to get the urgency across, basically, and then he would have had to make a fitness check. And then maybe he would have made it. But I think that's about the best chance he would have had in that, just in the way things shook out there.
So as a GM to the player then, what do you think? Was there anything other than keeping track of names I really needed to improve on?
I think when it comes to investigation stuff, I think drawing conclusions and making assumptions, I think it's something you just have to, you have to go like, okay, well, I've got this, this, and this. Here's something it could mean. I'm just going to go check that right now. I'm not necessarily saying you didn't do that because there were some places where you did.
Right, like the water. As soon as you said that, I knew that it was be a thing, but I had no way to get to a hydrant or whatever.
Outside of that, it's one of those things where it's always hard to tell, is it I'm not communicating the idea clearly, or is it that you're not putting these two separate ideas together like they need to be put, So it's
right.
I think that's the thing that makes running mysteries difficult. It's why I try to not put a ton of red herrings and stuff, because you're already a big barrier when you're trying to communicate an idea without telling someone directly.
Right.
Yeah, that's every Reddit post ever where they're asking if they're the asshole. It's like, well, you didn't verbally tell them the thing you wanted. You just sort of vaguely hoped. And that's the position I'm in.
But you're supposed to be able to read people's minds. That's what Reddit has taught me.
I can, because I'm the game master.
I see. Okay.
You can't. That's why you're a player.
I see. Okay.
How about what was your least favorite moment?
I think it's the 3rd episode when we hit that knoll. And it wasn't necessarily because of anything on your end as far as storytelling, at least I don't think it was. It was just trying to get the clues and trying to figure out, okay, this is maybe what's going on. And part of that was probably because I had a bunch of failed rolls. There's nothing we can do about that. If I'm talking to somebody trying to get at least some idea and I fail, well, it is what it is. So I don't think that's necessarily on either of us. It's just the way how that part of the story kind of panned out. And it was, at the end of the day, rules, because the second to last and the last episode, the beginning of those games, horrible rolls. And it wasn't until midway to the end when I was having rules that were decent.
Yeah.
But, nothing we can do about that.
Yeah. And I think some of that was also playing to your character. Your character, because he's someone who doesn't, at that point, he still didn't believe in the supernatural. He's still thinking,
Right.
like, oh, yeah, these rocks are magnets or something, whatever.
Right.
All that kind of stuff. It's different from, like, in our current Call of Cthulhu game, not on the podcast. Everyone who is in the party either has experience with the supernatural or just believes in it anyways for other reasons.
Right.
And so all of them know, like, oh, weird things happening. I'm just going to assume it's supernatural and act on that. Your character's going, supernatural is just a thing I talk about to scam people out of money.
Yeah.
So,
well, and even going to the other game, even previous to everybody knowing supernatural is real, everybody had the motivation of, I needed to make the money, or I need to, listen to my boss or whatever. They had a reason to push that narrative forward. Whereas my guy, at the end of the day, he could just look at the evidence and not care, because to him, he's going to plant evidence anyways in the photos through Photoshop.
the other difference, I think, is the most difficult thing about a one-on-one game, especially when I haven't paired you up with an NPC or a group or something like that, is when you're in a normal player character group, it can be like, okay, this guy, for character reasons, he's not really going to look into this. He doesn't care about this, but it doesn't matter because you've got 3 or 4 other people.
A whole bunch of other people. Yeah.
And they all have, like, oh, this person is not interested in going to go ask the Catholic Church because they don't like Catholics or whatever. And that,
Right.
but it doesn't matter because this other guy is going to do it. So I think it's definitely something where either I have to give you, I guess we didn't mention this before, I'm making your characters for this so far. It's just a little easier. I can sort of build the scenario to fit the character. So fun look behind the screen there. But either I need to give your character a really strong motivation, or I need to tie them to people that have that.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say my least favorite section was also in episode 3. And it's the part where you're looking for Helen and I keep calling for a roll to see if she's there. And I think I should have just decided at some point, just said she is there or she isn't.
Yeah, because at that point I was trying to follow up with the dirt that I had found.
Yeah.
And see if maybe she had any idea what it was.
Yeah. And I mean, she wouldn't have known what it was because her character sheet just didn't know anything, like just in general. But she definitely, I think, would have pushed you. She probably would have pushed you to talk to Father Anderson, just because he'd be the supernatural expert in the area.
Right.
And yeah, I definitely felt like, to me, I felt like when I was introducing those rocks in the mine, I felt like that was like a really big reveal. But I think it was definitely, like we were saying, I think it's because your character didn't believe in it. He's just thinking like, magnets.
How did my character even, did he keep the rocks? I'm trying to remember. Or did he just...
When you first got down there in the mine and got all the way to the end, you used one of your gloves, turned it inside out to capture the rocks.
But why did I do that? I guess I just wanted a sample?
You never really told me.
Yeah.
I was just like,
well,
good thing he's taking the rocks, because if he just looks at them and goes, gosh, those sure are rocks, and walks away, this is going to be a lot harder for him.
Man, I could have swore there was a reason for it, but oh well. I edit the podcast, so eventually I'll kind of be like, what were you doing, dude?
Yeah. It was one of those things where I was like, if you hadn't taken some of the rocks, it would have been really hard to... I think Helen probably would have just died. I don't think you would have made it to her. You might have seen the monster, but I don't think you could have made it there in time to help her. But I think that's the other thing that I felt like was weak on my end, was when you're... you made that final influence roll on Helen to try and see if there was any connections. And I just sort of gave you that Capwell had seen the monster and that you sort of pieced that together. I think probably I should have just kept that and just left it as a mystery, because part of the problem is that was sort of supposed to be the first thing you figured out in my head.
Well, I'm pretty sure I had figured that out, like, internally. At the end of the day, he was really jittery. He didn't want to talk about it. He broke his arm, doesn't want to say how it happened. The problem is, though, is my character
Yeah.
doesn't believe in any of it. So then he took that kind of on face value. Internally, I didn't know that he, obviously saw the monster, but at the very least, I thought he has to have something with it, whether it was seeing it or he was related to somebody that was it
Montwait.
whether he was somehow related to Montwait or whatever. And I was trying to go down that alley. But yeah, no, my character Victor definitely would not assume monster. He would assume dumbass and then leave it at that.
And he was right, but also monster.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would have liked to have done a little bit better, and I did a little bit of it, we got when Helen comes and confronts you and just does it really badly because she's Helen and she's not the brightest bulb in the box. But there were other characters that I think should have come talk to you. The bar owner, I think, should have come talk to you at some point, even if it wasn't about the mystery. Just based on her character, she should have come talk to you.
Did I ever talk to the bar owner? I guess in the first episode.
I don't think you ever really talked to her.
It was order drinks, and that's pretty much it.
So I think that's mostly on me for not introducing them as a character. Outside of that,
was the bar owner related to Montawait?
Nobody was.
Ah, dang.
Because remember, he had like a romance with Helen's grandmother, but he died before anything could come of it. So nothing ended up happening there.
Yeah, I'm excited for the next game, playing a character that does whatever it is, believe it.
Yeah.
Even if it's not their expertise or something, but where they have that drive they assume it's something supernatural or something, whatever.
Yeah. The other thing I like, so we're switching systems, obviously. Well, it wasn't obvious until I said it.
Surprise.
We're switching to a hack of Tunnel Goons that me and Will put together. Nothing too crazy. Working title is just Tunnel Goons Paranormal Hack. Tells you about how much thought we put into it. But I like it just because it's gonna sort of simplify the rolling a lot and keep the action moving. And I think it takes some of the focus off of the character sheet, if that makes any sense.
Well, especially with the way how, we adapted a way to kind of define a character's space and then what they are and all that. I think it simplifies it in a way that's like you were saying before. You can look at it and you know exactly who the character is.
Yeah, I think for sure just making it where either your character believes in the supernatural or very early on is given reason to. Because I'm fine with your character starting out like not thinking it's real and then something happens like within the first 10 minutes.
Like imagine if Victor came into the town, found a pebble that all of a sudden started moving on its own because it was returning back to the main mass of the monster.
Or if Victor came into town to talk to Capwell but saw the monster attack somebody.
Right.
Or saw the monster leaving from an attack. So like he doesn't even see the whole monster, but he can see like this obviously paranormal thing happening.
Right. And then, that whole motivational shift would have happened in episode 1 or episode 2,
Alternatively, if instead of being like a lone, I keep calling him a reporter. He's a journalist because he's not on screen or whatever. But instead of being like a lone journalist, if you were like assigned a partner and that guy was a true believer,
oh yeah, that'd be great.
Then I think not only would we get like some fun back and forth between the two of you, we'd also have a way I can have someone sort of pushing at threads.
Right. I mean, you would be...
He doesn't have to be right. He just has to, be there.
He has to be that voice of reason that's like, maybe it is something supernatural. I found this rock. It looks weird. Like something.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to sort of... It's always difficult to do companion characters, and a lot of game masters pretty much don't do them because they don't want to...
It makes sense.
They don't want them to become GM PCs. But at the same time, I think if you can manage them properly where it's not just you as the hand of God saying, go do this thing, then I think it adds just a lot to have those characters.
To have that soundboard, essentially, for me to bounce off of you, and you're not necessarily steering like super hard, but at the very least, especially with my character, he doesn't believe in any of it. Having a character that's always with him or mostly with him, kind of edging that on helps.
Yeah. I think overall, though, I think the game was pretty solid. I think it stayed moving. The characters were all pretty fun. They're all distinct. And I was pretty happy with coming up with a monster that could be defeated in a lot of ways.
Because we had water, figuring out the burial on my own, figuring it out with Father Anderson, ended up evolving to getting Father Jameson to help. What were some other ways it could have been solved?
Well, I think I mentioned this off air, but if you could keep the monster busy while Father Anderson took care of it, you could do that.
So he could have exorcisted himself.
Third thing you could have done is blow up the new mine.
So alternatively, my character could have figured out that by getting rid of that mine, it would have solved the problem.
Yeah, that was the least likely way to figure it out, because that's also the way the monster goes away on its own. Eventually, it would cause enough carnage and destruction at the new mine to satisfy itself. So it's kind of the fail state, but if you had decided that your character was like a really eco-caring person, then he could have worked with Helen and done some
Right.
eco-terrorism.
Hey, Final Fantasy VII. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
Wait, so then I gotta ask then with Helen, why did the monster go after her?
I think we've mentioned this a couple times. She saw it. It has a
Oh, yeah,
motivation,
that's right.
but it's not intelligent, if that makes sense. So if it sees someone around that area when it's active, it assumes a lot.
Okay. So then, like, if Capwell had never seen it, then the monster would have just focused on the mines.
Yeah, if no one had seen it, it would have been trashing machinery and blowing up the mines. But the more stuff it destroyed, the stronger it was going to get over time.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And more likely that it would find others.
yeah, over time it would have seen somebody.
Right. Cool.
Any final thoughts on that arc?
I liked how, as my character was trying to figure out things, through like MySpace and stuff, that was allowed, that made him, more realistic to, how he was trying to go about things. So I think that worked out pretty well. And while it didn't affect too much of the story as a whole, it just gave the flavor, of how he is.
Yeah, I think it was a good way to keep the time period in mind where a lot of people still didn't, if they had internet, they didn't use it as much as we do anymore. These days it'd be like, oh, what's that meme where it's like, no Facebook account, no Twitter account, no job history, this guy's a ghost, and it's just a guy who lives with his mom.
Right.
It's like back then, not being on the internet was more normal than being on the internet. And it was really that curve right then. Like that was when people were starting to really go like, the internet is the future of business.
But now we're in the era of the metaverse and VR chat stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was right at that point too where, my character had a laptop, so he was able to look things up, but it wasn't instantaneous. It was like things were back then, a back burner of things you want to do when you get to your place.
Yeah. And it, there's sort of instead of going on just a general thing, it's like, oh, I have to know about these specific forums, really. I can't just keep making Google searches or asking really particular questions in these areas or whatever. I can't go post on Stack Overflow or whatever.
Right. Which is why my character it was really important to him to get those photos out there, because that would have been tragic if his camera had broke or something, and then the city or the town died and nobody knows why.
Yeah. And this next game kind of still takes place in that same universe, if that makes sense. In theory, there could come a time where you have a character whose introduction to the supernatural was those photographs.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So it's very much, you could have someone who is related to Victor Smith or worked with Victor Smith or all sorts of things, or knows Helen or Father Anderson, any of the people that were influenced by that.
Cool.
Yeah, I definitely, because I haven't decided yet whether or not your new character has already dealt with the supernatural or if this is going to be like them gain their first taste of it. I am considering a sort of like paranormal investigation group of sorts, kind of like a militia. So not a government agency and not something with as much support support as the Vatican has in this setting, but
So something kind of like a supernatural. You got a group of people that are hunting things down.
possibly. I've never seen it. But it's sort of like an informal network. You know, like probably if you went to like a big enough city, there would be a pretty formal structure. But if you're out anywhere in like New Mexico or Arizona or, you know, any of these places where the population isn't largely that centered, then I think
Right.
you probably wouldn't have that. You just have people posting through some sort of like decentralized forums in code, that sort of thing. Like you have to meet someone in person who introduces you to the group and teaches you how to do it. So
Right.
I don't know if that is necessarily going to be how the next one works, but it is something that happens in that universe.
Yeah, that'd be really funny if Victor Smith kind of starts that, like not fully, but like a whole bunch of amateurs see it and that's how they kind of start.
I feel like he's almost certainly going to be in contact with them from now on, just for having posted something that they can identify as real. You know, they can follow up with the people there and confirm it, and you know, it's a difficult thing to cover up. It's interesting writing this one because part of the idea was that this monster would be really easy to deal with if you believed in it.
Right, because you would have gone into town, you would have saw it, and if you were well versed like Father Jameson, then you would know how to handle letting its soul pass or whatever it ended up being. But also too, like if that never happened, finding out that it's weak against water and things like that.
Yeah, I was happy with that because I definitely feel like a lot of monster hunts end up being like the Call of Cthulhu campaign we're in right now. If you didn't ever read that one particular book in the library, I don't think you can defeat that monster because you never get the ritual that you need. So then it sort of becomes like a guaranteed kill. I'm just not a big fan of that. I think in general, I like there to be, if not multiple ways of killing it, at least multiple ways of dealing with it.
Right.
It's fine if you can only kill it with a stake through the heart or whatever, but if you can also, you know, contain it with crosses, it should have rules by which it functions, ideally, even if they're not obvious.
Right. Yeah, that kind of almost dives into like the difference of having a soft magic system versus a hard magic system.
You know, that is the one big advantage D&D Magic has over most other games that don't copy their method. But anyways, I think we pretty much covered everything we wanted to talk about as far as that arc went.
I hope you all enjoyed the retrospective for the first season of the Die Again podcast. Currently, we are hard at work with season 2, and thank you for joining us. Please consider giving us a follow, and we will see you guys soon.